Hello everyone, and thanks for taking the time to check out this video. For today's presentation, we'll be doing part one of a three-part series on commercial MP5 clones with a particular emphasis on the Century Arms AP5. This first video will focus on what someone will want to know when entering the 9mm MP5 market in the 2020s and is intended to function as something of a buyer's guide for those new to the pattern. To that end, we'll be breaking down the range of choices which prospective MP5 owners will face and explaining the pros and cons of all options. If you are someone who is interested in getting an MP5 pattern but aren't sure whether or not you will need to navigate the NFA process, which model will work best for you, or which brands are even worth buying, this is the video for you. If you are more interested in information on mechanically understanding, inspecting, and optimizing MP5 style firearms, you will find those subjects discussed in part 2 of this series. Finally, if you want to see a performance analysis and comprehensive review of this full-size AP5 specifically, that will be in part 3. All video parts will be linked in the description of this video as soon as they are available. As a brief obligatory disclaimer before we begin, I have no personal or professional relationship with any manufacturer or retailer named in this video. I am not receiving any compensation for these videos outside of negligible restricted ad revenue. I am a small YouTuber with nothing to sell you, and my only ulterior motive is to try and earn channel growth by providing information that you, the viewer, find useful. Obviously, it's up to you to decide if I am successful in that regard, but that is my sincere objective. Without further ado, let's get into it. The MP5 pattern of firearm requires little introduction. It is arguably the most iconic submachine gun design in history and is recognizable even to casual firearm enthusiasts. It's seen real-world use in high-profile counter-terror and SOF operations and is memorably featured in films, video games, and books. Like most firearms which have achieved this level of notoriety, it is important to understand that the MP5 has taken on a level of mythology which often departs from its physical reality, but that will be discussed at greater length in part 2 of this series. For now, we just need to acknowledge that there are many pathways by which a person might become enamored with the MP5, and consequently, it sits high on the wish list for many firearm collectors. That said, MP5 ownership has several significant barriers to entry, especially when compared to other iconic firearms such as Mausers, Kalashnikovs, and others. Quite simply, true MP5s have at least one, but often as many as 3 features, which cause them to fall under National Firearms Act regulation, at least here in the United States. In their original form, MP5s are usually select-fire, short-barreled rifles, which may utilize suppressors, whether external or integral in design. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's be clear that for residents of most U.S. states, there is nothing stopping you from buying a real-deal HK MP5, which incorporates all of those features. There are plenty of MP5s, MP5 trigger packs, and MP5 sears on the transferable machine gun registry. That said, the problem for most people is that due to government-imposed artificial scarcity, these items generally cost more than a down payment on a house. If these types of numbers aren't a problem for you, that's great, but this isn't the right video for you. Stop watching, fill up a pillowcase with gold Krugerrands, and head down to your local Class 3 dealer. They'll take care of you. For the rest of us, let's break down our other options. For starters, we need to let go of select fire capability because that's really what drives the insane price spikes. Once we limit ourselves to semi-automatic only MP5 pattern firearms, we start to see price tags back in the realistic range. As for suppression, that's a pretty simple one to navigate. Suppressors compatible with the MP5 are reasonably affordable, so either you want to go through the NFA process of getting one, or you don't. This isn't a make or break either way. You don't need a suppressor to enjoy an MP5. However, I did suppress mine, and later on in this series I'll talk in greater detail about MP5 suppression. Probably the most significant legal obstacle to MP5 ownership is the issue of SBR restriction. All historically relevant MP5 variants utilize barrel lengths under 16 inches, and most historically relevant MP5 variants use some form of shoulder stock, which means that even semi-automatic clones of these variants would be considered short-barreled rifles under U.S. federal law and are regulated accordingly. This leaves us with 5 possible options, each of which has pros and cons. Option number 1, we can get an MP5 style pistol and keep it in pistol configuration. For historical collectors or movie buffs, this might be just the ticket as a display piece and range toy. Personally, I have a more practically oriented interest in the MP5, so this isn't my first choice. I've never found semi-automatic large platform pistols to make a whole lot of sense, at least for my uses. Option number 2, we can get an MP5 style rifle with a factory 16-inch barrel. This may be a headache-free option for some people, but it's definitely not for everyone. In my opinion, this really compromises the essential looks and, more importantly, the handling characteristics of the weapon, and that really diminishes my interest. The way I see it, if I'm going to have a true 9mm rifle, I'd rather have something that was designed for that footprint rather than something that was stretched to fit. Option number 3, we can get an MP5 style short-barreled rifle transferred to us on an ATF Form 4. This is a fine option. It does involve additional cost and legal restrictions, but in theory, it allows us to get exactly what we want straight from the factory. The biggest detraction with this option is that when we buy a factory SBR, that firearm is registered to us before we even get to know if we like it. If you're going this route, you better know exactly what you're getting, and you better be sure that that is what you want. Option number 4, we can get an MP5 style pistol and convert it to an SBR on an ATF Form 1. I think this is a great option. We still have to deal with the cost and legal restrictions of a short-barreled rifle, however, it at least gives us the opportunity to inspect and get to know the specific weapon before we take the plunge and register it under the NFA. If we don't like it as much as we thought, or discover our individual example has issues, we can just return it or resell it as a Title I firearm without already having committed to the tax stamp. And finally, option number 5, we can get an MP5 style pistol with a brace. This is another great option. In addition to giving us some idea of how something might perform prior to permanent SBR conversion, some people discover that they are satisfied in braced configuration. There are a range of practical benefits to having a firearm classified as a Title I handgun, including unrestricted interstate travel, loaded carry privileges, and easy resale opportunities. Additionally, some people can't or won't go through the NFA process, and this may be their only alternative. The biggest problem with this option is that the long-term legal status of braced pistols is very uncertain, and while configurations like this are perfectly legal at time of filming, that may change in the future. Additionally, it is very easy to accidentally convert an otherwise legal braced pistol into an unregistered AOW by adding the wrong accessories in the wrong places. Staying compliant can be a real headache if that's a priority for you. And like I said, no wrong answers here. Everything has pros and cons. It's up to you to decide what makes the most sense to you, but hopefully that breakdown makes that process a little easier. Next up, let's talk about models. Once again, new MP5 owners have a few choices. Technically, there are dozens and dozens of MP5 models out there, but I'll break them down into what I think are the 4 most practical categories. You've got the full-size MP5 with its full-size receiver and 8.9-inch barrel. You've got the compact MP5K with its compact receiver and 4.5 to 5.8-inch barrel. You've got the reverse stretch MP5, which combines the full-size receiver of the MP5 with the shorter barrel of the MP5K. And finally, you've got the MP5 SD, which is basically a regular MP5 with a ported barrel and integrated suppressor. So let's break those down. The full-size MP5 is the original design, and it is excellent. Built into that design is a high degree of durability and reliability under a broad range of conditions, which for the purpose of this video, I will call a wide performance envelope. In practice, this means that full-size MP5s will usually digest most commercially available 9mm ammunition pressures and weights under most environmental conditions with or without a suppressor. They tend to be very user-friendly, even without tuning or parts replacement. By contrast, the MP5K is a follow-up design which sought to shrink the venerable MP5 action into a smaller and more concealable footprint. This was a successful endeavor, but like most firearm miniaturization programs, it came at a price. In addition to reducing the physical footprint of the weapon, HK also reduced the weapon's functional envelope. Unlike their full-size counterparts, MP5Ks often need to be tuned to a given ammunition type and suppressor status, and changing that ammunition or suppressor status without retuning may negatively affect reliability or even cause damage to the firearm. In practice, this usually means swapping out locking pieces and rollers, but I'll save further discussion of that for part 2. For now, even properly tuned MP5Ks still tend to exhibit sharper recoil, accelerated parts wear, and lower tolerance for environmental conditions compared to their full-size counterparts. In the simplest terms possible, MP5Ks are measurably worse than full-size MP5s at everything, except for being small, and in that category they win handily. Reverse stretch MP5s are basically an alternative take on the MP5K concept, where only the barrel length of the MP5 is reduced rather than the whole receiver. This creates what many consider to be a happy medium, a weapon that is more compact than the MP5, yet preserves its full functional envelope. The MP5 SD is pretty straightforward. It's a regular MP5 that incorporates a ported barrel and integral suppressor, which trade kinetic energy for downrange signature reduction. Even 115 and 124 grain ball ammunition will remain subsonic out of an SD model, which is clever, but not necessarily better than just adding an external suppressor to a standard model. It is, however, what I believe the kids call a vibe. So what does all that mean? Well, once again, it doesn't mean that any model is categorically better or worse than any other. They all have pros and cons. It's really hard to go wrong with a full-size MP5. That's an iconic and user-friendly option. If, however, you really want an ultra-compact MP5 pattern that can fill niches in which a full-size model quite literally will not fit, that's exactly what the K model was designed to do. Also, of course, the K is iconic in its own way and has an inimitable aesthetic appeal of its own. Additionally, it should be noted that MP5Ks are often available in multiple barrel configurations, so if you want the most compact version possible, you go with a non-protruding barrel, or if you want a suppressor-compatible barrel, you can go just a little longer depending on whether you want a threaded interface, tri-lug, or both. Many people find that an MP5K can fit in rolls with a suppressor attached, in which a full-size MP5 would require that suppressor to remain uninstalled until ready to use. Moving on to the reverse stretch model, this is probably the least historically significant of the lot. However, from a purely practical perspective, it may have the strongest claim of all. Some people argue that the reverse stretch is the most useful possible combination of available MP5 features, and I'm not going to push back on that. Finally, the MP5 SD just goes right back to being iconic. It has distinct lines, distinct performance characteristics, and if that's what you want, for a long time, it was really hard to replicate. That said, these days, a guy named HK Bryce sells an SD-style handguard for standard MP5s, which when combined with a conventional external suppressor, offers what is probably a fairly satisfying SD experience for a fraction of the price. Still, semi-automatic SDs do exist, and if that's what you really want, nothing's going to beat the real deal. So as always, no wrong answers here. For my 2 cents, I tend to think the full-size and reverse stretch model are the most compelling overall. However, you may arrive at a different conclusion. Either way, hopefully we've covered what needs to be considered when making that decision for yourself. So now that we've broken down the basic models, let's see what market offerings are actually available. Please note I am limiting this market analysis to 9mm offerings which are currently or have recently been available on the primary market, not every MP5 clone that has ever been offered for sale. Additionally, I will not be including offerings from higher-end custom makers like Dakota Tactical or RDTS, simply because I don't really see them as being entry-level offerings, and that is the subject of this video. I'm working under the assumption that most viewers still watching this video will consider the HK SP5 as their upper limit for a first MP5 purchase. However, if that's not accurate, please be aware there are additional US-made offerings with an excellent reputation. However, they do come with truly significant price tags, and their lead time is often measured in years. With that in mind, the 5 companies we will be covering today are HK, PTR, Zenith, POF, and Century Arms/MKE. They are listed in roughly descending order in terms of price, at least at time of filming. First up, HK. Heckler and Koch is obviously the original license holder for the MP5, and their semi-automatic SP5 lineup is as close as you can get to the real deal. These firearms are made on the same well-maintained production lines as MP5 submachine guns and incorporate all of the most recent design features and updates to the 50-year-old weapon system. The SP5 can be had in full-size and K configuration, and for high rollers, it is even available in a factory SD version. That SD model comes in a little over $6,000, whereas the full-size and K model come in around $3,000, at least at time of filming. In terms of the SP5's quality reputation, my analysis shows that it is very good, or at least fully in line with what you would expect from a higher-end item from a reputable manufacturer. No manufacturer should be expected to be 100% perfect in their output. That's true of Daniel Defense, Knights Armament, whoever else you might think of, but the point is that SP5 production quality does seem to be held to appropriately high standards. In other words, the odds of you getting a bad SP5 are very low, and if you do have an issue, you can probably expect to be taken care of in a reasonably professional manner. Full credit to HK for that. On the other side of the coin, I do think it's important to point out that there is not any magic associated with HK manufacturing. Hopefully that's painfully obvious to most of you. However, acolytes to the cult of German engineering have clearly had some success in mythologizing the MP5 to be something other than it is. This will be a major theme in part 2 of this series when we really get into the mechanics and construction of the weapon, but for now it's important to understand that the MP5 is a product of post-war Germany and is in fact a brutally simple amalgamation of welded sheet metal that is almost Russian in its utilitarianism. To overemphasize the precise tolerances and hand fitment of HKSP5 production is an ego-driven farce propagated by people who see firearms as status symbols rather than tools. The MP5 is not a Swiss watch. It is a mechanical and spiritual descendant of the G3, SETME, and STG-45M, and therefore a member of one of the more crudely effective weapon lineages of the 20th century. Again, I will expand on and defend that perspective at greater length in part 2 of this series, but for now let me give you a brief example. One common but not usually function-inhibiting imperfection on MP5 pattern firearms is a cocking tube which is not perfectly centered to the triple-frame front sight tower. Many owners of lower-cost MP5 clones post pictures of these imperfections on forums and are frequently met with comments like, "This is why I'm glad I bought an SP5," or "The way you fix that is by buying from HK." Then, when SP5 owners post suspiciously similar photographs, the comment section suddenly shifts to, "Oh, that's perfectly normal," and "It's a submachine gun, not a sniper rifle." And listen, although I personally suspect some of those comments are posted in bad faith, that second batch of comments actually represents the correct understanding. That is perfectly normal, and these are not supposed to be sniper rifles. MP5s, like their full-power older siblings, were not designed to appease status-obsessed civilians that live for that moment when they get to ask for a manager. They were designed for close-quarters combat, and like many welded sheet metal weapons, they were designed to function within a relatively wide range of tolerances. So in summary, the thing to understand about SP5 quality control is that while it is better than every other maker on this list, it is not so supernatural as some people make it out to be. HK's well-earned reputation does not come from always being perfect, but rather it comes from almost never being bad, and those are very different things. Next up, we have PTR, a US-based manufacturer who offers a wide range of HK-inspired products, including full-size K models, a reverse stretch, and rifle-length MP5 clones. Street prices for all of PTR's 9mm offerings seems to be around the $1,700 mark, which is a substantial discount compared to HK, but still a little higher than what we'll see from the remaining manufacturers. In terms of quality control, PTR has not earned a reputation competitive with HK, but spoiler alert, none of the remaining companies on this list have a QC reputation that competes with HK. That said, all of the companies, PTR most certainly included, clearly have the ability to build a rock-solid clone. They just don't do it with the boring regularity I would expect from a firearm at this price point. There are tons of happy PTR owners out there with huge round counts in their weapon, but there are also more than a few horror stories. PTR is a US company, and therefore I think that most people who have issues will eventually end up being taken care of. However, based on consumer reports, it may be a frustratingly tedious process to get there in some cases. Lastly, it should be noted that PTR does offer machine-welded Picatinny optic rails and M-LOK handguards on many of their models, which may account for the price discrepancies between their most immediate competitors. On the flip side, they do seem to ship their products with ETS brand magazines, which in my testing experience have been probably the worst MP5 magazines I've used, with the possible exception of AC Unity. Next up, we have Zenith, another US manufacturer of MP5 clones. It should be noted that Zenith was previously known for importing the same Turkish-made clones, now being sold by Century. However, their products today are made in-house. Zenith offers their ZF5s in full-size, rifle length, and a broad selection of K configurations. Here's a visual guide to Zenith's MP5K offerings, with the different letter suffixes corresponding to subtle differences in barrel length and significant differences in muzzle type. The ZF5 pistols range in price from $1,375 to $1,500, whereas the rifle option only appears to be sold in a premium package at a sticker price north of $2,000. In terms of quality control, I do not want to beat a dead horse here. Zenith customers appear to have a very similar experience overall to PTR customers. That is to say, Zenith clearly has the ability to make a rock-solid clone, and this is what most of their customers seem to receive. However, there are still way too many stories from people who got bad examples. Additionally, reports of Zenith's warranty support are also mixed and range from excellent to unacceptable. Next up, we have POF, or Pakistani Ordnance Factory, and they are exactly what their name would suggest. POF has a long history of producing MP5 pattern firearms under license from HK and selling semi-automatic clones on the US market. This is both a good thing and a bad thing, by the way. The good is that it means that POF at one time probably had the tooling and technical data to produce firearms which rivaled that of HK. The bad is that it means that POF is very likely manufacturing an older incarnation of the MP5 that does not include the iterative improvements HK has incorporated in more recent years, and it also opens the door to speculation that their tooling may not have been properly maintained or replaced. In any case, POF5 commercial clones have been made available in full-size and reverse stretch configuration. It does not appear that POF makes a true K model. However, as we discussed earlier, the reverse stretch is probably a compelling alternative to most consumers anyway. Prices for both models seem to have been around $1,500 when most recently available. In terms of quality control, it's really the same story as PTR and Zenith here. They know how to make a good clone, but they definitely don't get it right every time. What is noteworthy now is that because POF is a foreign manufacturer with a small US footprint, there may be less support available for consumers who do experience issues. For this reason, it is often advised that people who do buy POF products do so through a well-established retailer with above-average customer support policies. This just may give you another layer of support. And finally, we have Century Arms, which is currently importing MP5 clones manufactured by MKE in Turkey. These are the same firearms which were previously being sold by Zenith before they took on domestic manufacture. AP5s are available in both full-size and K configuration, both of which at the time of filming are selling for around $1,250. However, sale prices as low as $1,100 are fairly common. In terms of quality control, this is where things get really interesting. Despite markedly lower prices, MKE definitely does not have any worse of a reputation than PTR, Zenith, or POF, and if anything, they do seem to represent a measurable increase in customer satisfaction. Let's be clear that Century is still a lot closer to those other three than they are to HK, and we still see the occasional horror story from AP5 owners that we really don't see from SP5 owners. But the point is that relative to their estimated number of units sold, AP5s do seem to be a marginally safer bet than POF5s, ZF5s, or PTR products. It should also be noted that we do have some prior data on MKE quality from the earlier Zenith imports, which were overwhelmingly well received. Some people attribute this reputation to supplementary QC procedures performed by Zenith that are not likely to be replicated by Century Arms, but speculation aside, the AP5 does seem to be living up to the early Zenith reputation. That's pretty remarkable given what is now a much lower price point. Furthermore, it should be noted that once again we are dealing with a foreign manufacturer using older HK tooling and specs, so the same considerations apply. Finally, although Century Arms' direct customer support, or lack thereof perhaps, is something of a running joke in the internet firearms space, it's unclear to me how fair these characterizations are at this time. Century Arms has accumulated quite a few disgruntled customers over the years, and that's important to acknowledge. However, I'm seeing far more memes about bad AP5 warranty support than I am actually seeing documentation of negative experiences. In fact, all of the real experiences I've read so far have been above average, which is promising. And I know people are going to chime off against Century Arms in the comments, and all I can really say to that is, as far as I'm concerned, Century Arms is like Walmart. They sell good products, they sell bad products. If you find yourself only buying the bad products, maybe you should research what you're buying more. I don't care that they burn people, I don't care their customer service is bad, because they've brought some amazing products to market over the past 12, 15 years for really cool prices, and I'm not going to miss out on that because people make mean memes. In any case, what do we do with all those options? Well, I want to wrap this video up soon, but I'll summarize as best I can. Is it worth considering buying anything other than an HK? In my opinion, absolutely. It seems clear that every single company we talked about today is capable of producing an MP5 clone that can go toe-to-toe on the firing line with an HK SP5 and at a much lower price point. Some people never accept that, but this video isn't for them. Not everything is. So does that mean there's no reason to buy an SP5? Not at all. There are plenty of great reasons to buy an SP5. For starters, even if we put aside all the elitism and gatekeeping that comes with possessing apparently an upper middle class purchasing power, there is nothing wrong with wanting your semi-automatic MP5 to say HK on the side. Authentic roller-delayed HKs have been off the US market for decades, and for many people, the SP5 represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to fill a niche in their collection. That's a great reason to buy an HK. Friends of my channel who have seen my SKS collection. Do you think I bought the most expensive SKSs I own because I thought it was a good value? No, it's because I wanted to fill a piece in my collection, and that's what the price is, and nothing else will fill that gap. If that's the reason you want to buy an SP5, that's an awesome reason. Another good reason to buy HK is convenience. If you buy an SP5, you will get all of the most modern components, and you have a much lower risk of having to deal with functional defects or warranty issues. So it really just comes down to a value proposition. How much are those things worth to you? If they're worth an extra $1,000 to $2,000 and you know they're worth that, you will never regret your purchase. And there are many very happy SP5 owners out there, and I don't blame them. It's an awesome thing to own. There are, however, also some unhappy SP5 owners out there who fell for the myth that HK had some secret sauce and all their problems in life were going to be fixed as soon as they opened up that box. It's a great gun, but it's a gun. It's not magic. In terms of the US-made MP5 clones, I don't see a ton of daylight between them. Zenith and PTR's QC and customer service reputations are similarly mixed, and when you factor in the added value of PTR's M-Lock foregrip and welded optic rails, the prices are pretty similar as well. If I was to choose between them, I would make that decision based on the specific model I wanted, not necessarily the company. PTR offers a reverse stretch, and that's pretty cool. Zenith has a wide range of muzzle and barrel configurations for K models. Maybe they have exactly what you are looking for. All that said, the only really compelling argument I can make for buying from either of those companies is that they are US manufacturers, and whenever possible, it's great to support US manufacturers. I'm personally happy to pay fellow Americans a reasonable premium for a functional equivalent to a foreign product, but in this case, I'm just not sure it's a functional equivalent. Like I said, MKE guns really seem to be a safer bet than Zenith or PTR. That said, for someone who is more committed than me to only buying American, Zenith and PTR are your entry-level options, and I think either of them will probably work for you. As for POF, honestly the best pitch I can give them is they seem to offer the most affordable reverse stretch model on the market. If you know you want a reverse stretch and a POF is available for a better price than PTR, it's probably a good buy. In terms of full-size models, however, I fail to see what POF offers that MKE doesn't offer a better version of at a better price point. And that leads us, of course, to Century Arms / MKE. This should not come as a surprise to anyone, but after extensive research and consideration, I came to the conclusion that for my money, the AP5 was a no-brainer. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to own an SP5. I've got the budget for one, and maybe one day I'll just send it. But for now, a $1,900 price swing is just not something I can wrap my head around for a brand name and a little bit of peace of mind. I was a special operations small arms repairman. I understand how the MP5 pattern is built and how it works, and I had full confidence in my own ability to get my AP5 running like a top, whether or not it came out of the box that way or whether or not I had warranty support. And spoiler alert, no regrets. I've got this thing fully kitted out, including a dedicated suppressor and more than 1,000 rounds of premium subsonic ammo down the pipe, and I'm still in for way less than a bone stock SP5. This has been one of my favorite purchases of the last 5 years. It's why I care enough to take the time to make a video on it. But again, that's me. Your priorities and the way you assign value may be different. I guess the very last subject to touch on before we close out is investment potential. I'll keep that brief. Some people say the SP5 is a good investment, and that may well be true. It hasn't been a good investment for the people who bought it during COVID times, but if they ever leave the US market, which is certainly possible, secondhand prices will almost certainly rise precipitously. On the other hand, I also think the AP5 has an investment quality of its own. I've been watching the MP5 clone market for about 12 years, and a solid clone for as low as $1,100 is not something that's been around before and may well not be around in the future. That doesn't mean anyone's going to retire off their AP5's appreciation. I'm just saying that good deals are good deals, and sometimes it's hard to appreciate how good a deal was until it's gone. We've all got stories like that. And that's it for today, guys. I hope this was a useful breakdown of what decisions you might need to make when breaking into the MP5 market. Obviously, I chose to go with a full-size AP5, but that doesn't mean it's the right choice for you. We're different people. If you watch this video all the way through, I sincerely appreciate it. And if I earned your engagement, please consider doing any combination of hitting like, comment, subscribe. Doesn't take much time for you, but it really does help me. And as a YouTube firearm content creator, I need help from you because I'm not going to get it from them. Other than that, I hope to catch you in the next installment of this series. And until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day.